The new number 11 Kolsch is available at Walter's Sports Bar starting today. This new beer is a collaboration between employee number 11 and Lost Barrel Brewing.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use, but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
Corbin sets and delivers. Swing and a line drive. Deep left center field. Young on the run. Won't get there. This one hops the wall. Caroms Young in the warning track. Rounding third is Suarez on his way to the plate. There'll be no play. He scores standing on the third double of the inning for the D-backs. 6 runs home here for the D-backs in the second. 9 hits in the game now for Arizona. And the Diamondbacks lead by the score of 8-0.
Now the pitch. Swing a long drive, left field. Back goes Cole. He's got another one. It's a 3-homer game for Eugenio Suarez. Diamondbacks add the extra point. They lead 14-0.
Well, I think that it had to be market value. That's what we were shooting for. This guy pitches at the back of a baseball game. He's proven that he can handle a closer's role. So I don't think we're asking for anything extravagant, but we did want market value for a closer that has another year of control, and that had a lot to do with it.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Wednesday, July 31st, 2024. Along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who was at Chase Field in Phoenix. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. What a wild 2024 MLB trade deadline day that we ended up having a ton of trades to conclude really one of the craziest trade deadline seasons in MLB history. The Nationals, they on Tuesday did not trade closer Kyle Finnegan. They did trade reliever Dylan Floro. And then the Nats, late night on Tuesday night, suffered their worst loss since the franchise came to Washington, D.C. A 17-0 loss at the Arizona Diamondbacks in Game 2 of a 3-game series. Worst margin of defeat for the Nats in a regular season game since the franchise moved to Washington, D.C. in the 2004-2005 offseason. The Nats, for this regular season, now 10 games below 500, 49-59. This installment of the Nats Chat podcast brought to us by the best legal recruiter in the Washington, D.C. market, Mason Kalfas. Step up to a World Series winner and hire the best legal recruiter out there. Check out Mason's website today, zenithlegal.com, or call or text Mason anytime, 202-486-3535. It is great to have you with us on this post-trade deadline installment of the Nats Chat podcast, for which there is a new episode for the morning after every Nats game day, weekday, weekend, doesn't matter. Mark has covered the team since it came to D.C. I've been talking D.C. area sports on radio and or via podcast for more than 20 years. So if you've been with us for a while, we appreciate that very much. If you are new to the podcast, welcome aboard. It's great to have you with us. We will deal with the debacle at the Diamondbacks in a bit. But the Nats on Tuesday did make a trade. They on Tuesday night announced having traded Dylan Floro to their opponent for late night on Tuesday night, the Diamondbacks. The Nats got back infielder Andres Chaparro. This was trade number 4 for the Nats in the lead up to this year's trade deadline. But the Nats did not trade Kyle Finnegan. Mark, you said that it was 50-50 whether the Nats would trade Finnegan. And sure enough, they did not trade Finnegan.
Well, Al, when you predict 50-50, you can't be wrong. No matter what happened, I could say I called this one, right? Look, I felt all along, we've talked about it, that the price for top-end relievers was really high. We saw what other teams gave up for guys. We know how much Mike Rizzo values players like Finnegan and Lane Thomas, who had more than a year of control. And once he sets his price, he sticks to it. And if you don't match that price, he's not going to go there. And as we discussed the other night, I don't think the performance Monday night was going to change the way Rizzo approached it. Maybe it scared off a team or two that might have had some interest in him, but Rizzo certainly wasn't going to change what he was asking for in the wake of that. So I felt like it just boiled down to, would anyone meet that price? And in the end, nobody did. as Rizzo told us, he didn't get what he called market value for Finnegan, who he still views as an elite closer. And because of the contract situation, felt no pressure that he needed to move him. And so it appears they have their closer, not just for the rest of this year, but for at least going into 2025. And hopefully he performs well enough to continue in that role.
You know, it's so tricky, right? Because we don't know what Mike Rizzo was being offered. We don't know necessarily how he defines market value. Maybe he got a bunch of really bad offers and is totally right to have not traded Finnegan. Maybe he got some pretty good offers and just overvalues Finnegan. Like, we just don't know. Mike Rizzo over the years has been terrific on trades. He understands trade markets. He knows what he's doing with trades. So I do think that he deserves a benefit of the doubt with any trade circumstance. I guess my thing is this. I just really hope that the Nats don't come to regret not trading Kyle Finnegan, because I do think that that is a possibility. Given the volatile nature of his position being a reliever, given that his peripherals scream that this productive season that he's having is not as good as it appears. You know, I was looking at some of Finnegan's numbers before the show here. He, for this regular season, has allowed a hard hit percentage per StatCast of 50.8. More than half the time he's giving up hard hit contact. And that 50.8 hard hit allowed percentage, that ranks in the first percentile among all pitchers in the majors. The first percentile. I mean, that's really bad. So yeah, like, he has these saves and he's done some good things, but I think to look at his season as potentially a house of cards that's about to collapse, I don't think that it's wrong to look at things that way. I want to ask you this, though, because now we can advance the story. So Finnegan is in his age 32 season. He's under team control through just next season. So the Nats, in not trading him this season now, essentially have three choices with Finnegan contractually. You could trade him this coming offseason or next season, although if you do that, I say, well, why didn't you just trade him this season? But okay, you could do that. You could re-sign him at some point. That would require spending at least decent money, you would think, but you could re-sign him. You also could have him for next season and then just let him leave as a free agent and thus get nothing for him. Which scenario do you think is most likely with Kyle Finnegan?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's going to depend on how does he finish out this year. If he continues on a downward trend, that could change the outlook there. And they may say, well, even if we're not going to look for any trades this winter, let's just go into next season, hope he works out. If he doesn't, maybe we move on. Or if the team doesn't win next year, they could be in a position where they're sellers again. They don't want to be there, but they could be. And if that happens, then maybe he has some value for them at that point. If he finishes the season strong, and this is just kind of a blip here in the middle of it. And we've seen every year that he's pitched, he's had a couple of rough stretches, to be sure, but then long stretches where he's really good. So I think these next 2 months still mean a lot. Then I think maybe you do approach him and say, okay, we like you. We think we're headed on the right track. We want to keep you around beyond this. And I don't think it would be outrageous to offer him something like a 2-year extension, something along those lines, maybe a club option after that. As you said, he's already 32. You don't want to be getting too deep into his 30s. And as you said, the volatile nature of relievers, you never really know. But I think his strongest suit, the strongest thing in his corner, he has been incredibly durable for them. Never come close to missing any time. Never been unavailable to pitch other than if it was like his third day in a row or something like that. I think there is value in that. I think they value that. So I could see a scenario where they do approach him. My guess would be it wouldn't be until the offseason that you do that. I don't think you do that right now and say, hey, would you be interested in coming back here and for a couple of years and we lock you up to that point? Because if you're him and you have any doubts about how next season's going to go, you don't know if you're going to get a better offer as a free agent. So I could completely understand why he might be motivated to do that. He believes in the organization. They gave him a shot after the A's never called him up in 6 years in their farm system. So he feels a lot of loyalty and appreciation for Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez and everyone else with the organization. So I think he would be agreeable to it. But I think just because of the way the last few weeks have gone, you don't approach him yet with that. I think you want to see how the next 2 months go before you make that call.
The Nats, since they came to D.C., have had quite the history with relievers, right? They've made a number of in-season trades for relievers, have certainly obtained relievers in off seasons in terms of, free agent signings and trades. But how often have they ever re-signed one of their own relievers to a significant contract? That really has not happened with any kind of frequency, right?
Yeah, I mean, Drew Storen and Tyler Clippard were both, they were ultimately traded before they ever became free agents. They've signed veterans to like 3-year deals. Sean Kelly, I remember, got a 3-year deal. Have they ever given an extension to somebody they already had? Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of anyone who fits that bill. But Finnegan is kind of an unusual case in that he's not homegrown, but he did make his major league debut for the Nationals. And so they've had him for a good long time. And he's sustained a certain level that makes you say they haven't been looking to move on from him. And as we've pointed out, if not him, somebody has to close. And usually if you want somebody with any kind of track record, it's going to cost you, whether in terms of dollars or it's going to cost you in terms of prospects to give up for an established closer in a trade. So while he may not be perfect, he's still pretty good and has a track record. They know him. He knows them. I think there are a lot of reasons to at least consider the possibility. And as far as the volatility of the position and what happens from here or there, I will say this. I think he's been pretty good at when things do go south on him. And we know that when he has bad games, they're really bad. But I think he's done a pretty good job of bouncing back from those. His slumps don't last for a long time. They're notable. The blowups are bad, but they usually last, say, a week, and then he gets right back on track and is really good. And there are worse qualities to have, I think, as a closer. I think whatever struggles he has are a product of the pitches that he throws, not the mindset, not him being timid at all or being overwhelmed by having this role. I think he's really grown into the closer's role from a mental standpoint.
It just is crazy when you take a step back. We, this trade deadline season, had a seller's market for relievers that's hard to remember. It really was wild just what was going on. Relievers were being traded and teams trading those relievers were getting back these massive hauls. And so the Nats, in having one of those relievers, you said to yourself, okay, this is the time. Like, now is the time to pounce, to capitalize. And that he doesn't end up getting traded is so interesting. So like I said, I hope that the Nats don't come to regret this. But you know what? Maybe the Nats next season are an 85-90 win team and Kyle Finnegan has 45 saves and we all live happily ever after. That scenario certainly is a possibility.
That is the hope, of course. That doesn't mean it's going to happen for sure. But I think in their minds, that's what they want to have happen, how they want this to go. And it would be fascinating someday to find out what was the best offer for him. I don't know that we'll ever find that out because unless it was such a lowball offer, and probably even on top of that, he'd have to be really good for them to come out and even say it, whether it was on or off the record. We probably won't know the answer to that. But look at what the other guys, the other top relievers got in return, and it's a lot. And so you've got to believe that somebody made a pretty legitimate offer for him, and that, at least in Mike Rizzo's mind, still wasn't enough.
Are you a lawyer that hates your boss even more than you hate jerks in Profar? Does your law firm always fail, just like the San Diego Padres? Well, Nats Chat sponsor Mason Kalfas is the best legal recruiter in the DC legal market, and you should give him a call. Mason specializes in working with law firm partners, associates, and senior government lawyers in antitrust, securities enforcement, energy, and life sciences. Mason is the founder of Zenith Legal, a 10-person legal recruiting firm with recruiters in D.C., New York, Philadelphia, and other cities. Mason has placed partners and associates in over half of the AmLaw 100 law firms. All conversations are 100% confidential and focused holistically on your career goals. Some lawyers change jobs for more money, some change jobs because of client conflicts, and some change because their colleagues are losers like the Padres and Phillies. Step up to a World Series winner and hire the best legal recruiter out there. Call Mason Kalfas today at 202-486-3535.
We fulfilled a lot of our objectives, the trade deadline. I think we got a deeper minor league system. I said we got some. We feel that we've got a couple impact players, and I think that it's going to prove that it's going to be very beneficial long term. So we're happy with the return. The process we felt worked well for us.
So when it comes to the trade that the Nats did make on Tuesday, them trading Dylan Floro to the Diamondbacks, the Nats get back infielder Andres Chaparro. So first of all, trading Floro was a no-brainer. Veteran reliever, 1-year contract, having a good season. A salute to the Nats for what was a successful signing of Floro. Signed him as a free agent this past December. This was his age 33 season, and he did a lot of good things for the Nats. He in this regular season for the Nats, 51 games, 52 and a third innings, ERA at 2.06, whip of 1.051. So a salute to Dylan Floro for a job well done with the Nats, and a salute to the Nats for a successful free agent signing. Now, Andres Chaparro, he's not some high-level prospect, let's make that clear, but age 25 season, having a really good season. He's been playing for the Diamondbacks AAA affiliate, the Reno Aces, OPS of 967 this season. Now, the Aces play in the Pacific Coast League, which is known to have highly inflated offensive numbers. So how much we should put stock into the offensive prowess of Andres Chaparro is to be debated. But what do the Nats think that they might have in this guy?
So I asked Rizzo that direct question. How much of those numbers are a product of the league that he's in, and how much is just his actual talent? And Rizzo, to his credit, said, that's a fair question to ask. He knows the track record of the league. But he said, if you've watched this guy take swings, you see that there is a legitimate hitter in there. Now, he's never been in the big leagues, and it's not like the Diamondbacks were considering him for a spot anytime soon, even though he was at AAA. Defensively, may not have a whole lot to offer at the two corner positions. This may be more of a future DH type. But I think when you're trading somebody like Dylan Floro, I think you get two options of how you can approach this. You either get like a single A prospect who might be 19, 20 years old, and maybe you got a chance at someday turning him into something, but chances are he's not, far from a slam dunk as a prospect. Or you get a guy who's maybe on the cusp of the big leagues, who doesn't have as high of a ceiling, but could in theory figure it out and maybe in the right situation could do something for you. So I think they took that route with it, and I think that's fine. I think if you're counting on getting something huge for Dylan Floro, you're not really being realistic about any of this. Middle relievers on one-year contracts at the trade deadline, while they are valuable to the teams who are getting them, and he could be very important to the Diamondbacks as they try to go back to the World Series, but you're not giving up a lot for 2 months of him. So I think it's worth the risk. In some ways, I'd almost prefer that than the shot in the dark, 19-year-old pitcher with a 98-mile-an-hour fastball who knows how he's going to turn out. So we'll see. I don't think he's suddenly about to become their third baseman in the future. They have plenty of those. Maybe first base is a spot we could see him. Maybe there's some DH possibilities. But I think for Dylan Floro, it's an appropriate return, and I don't think you should have any issues with what they got for him.
There's something else with the Nats, with Tuesday being 2024 MLB trade deadline day, that became impossible to ignore, and that was all of the reporting that the Nats were in on trading for St. Louis Cardinals outfielder Dylan Carlson. And on the surface, you say to yourself, well, why the heck would the Nats be in on Carlson, given the abundance of promising young outfielders in the Nats organization? Now, we know that a lot of times in trade deadline seasons, and not just MLB, but all sports, you get fake news. Like you get teams being mentioned as possibilities when those teams aren't really possibilities. So do we know if the Nats and Dylan Carlson, was that fake news? Was that legitimate? And if it was legitimate, what do you think Mike Rizzo was thinking in going after Dylan Carlson, given that the organization has all of these promising young outfielders?
I don't think it was purely fake news. I think his name came up at some point. I don't think it ever went anywhere. And I think the fact that it got out and the manner that it was getting out struck me, and I don't know this for a fact, but it struck me as the Cardinals floating his name out there. Initially connected to the Nationals, and maybe they had some interest in Dylan Floro. And then you started to hear, well, they're not the only team. There could be other teams interested in Dylan Carlson. And in the end, he was moved. I had the same reaction when I first saw it. I thought, well, how would he fit in here? It didn't really add up or make a lot of sense. The only thing I could think was they probably need some help in right field for the rest of this season, or at least until Dylan Cruz comes up, whenever that is. And here's a guy who maybe you buy low. He used to be a top prospect. Maybe he turns into something and he could be something for you. He's got several years of control beyond this. But even then you stop and say, well, he's ultimately going to be supplanted by Dylan Cruz. They already have James Wood. We've discussed how Jacob Young has kind of solidified the center field job, at least for now. So where exactly would he fit in, and how much money are you willing to spend on him as he reaches arbitration? It never added up in my mind. I'm guessing that the Nats and Cards had some discussion about Floro, And maybe the Cardinals came back and said, instead of a prospect, what about Dylan Carlson? This is a guy who they talked about a couple of years ago as part of a Juan Soto trade. And John Mozeliak did not want to include him in that kind of package. Though how the mighty have fallen, that all of a sudden he's maybe being discussed for Dylan Floro. So I think it came up. Maybe they considered it and ultimately said, that's not really a fit for us. And perhaps that was used to help push some other teams into the market, because I don't think it was ever a serious possibility that he would come to DC.
So this was year 4 of the Nats being aggressive sellers come the trade deadline, right? 2021 through 2024. The Nats ended up making 4 trades in the lead up to this deadline. July 13th, trading reliever Hunter Harvey to the Kansas City Royals. July 28th, trading outfielder Jesse Winker to the New York Mets. This past Monday night, July 29th, the Nats trading outfielder Lane Thomas to the Cleveland Guardians. And then on Tuesday night, announcing this trade of reliever Dylan Floro to the Arizona Diamondbacks. If you're looking at what the Nats got back over these 4 trades, I would think if you're ranking the prospects, Caden Wallace, who was obtained from the Royals, and Alex Clemmie, the pitcher who was obtained from the Guardians, those seem to stand out as the top 2 prospects obtained in this latest sell-off here by the Nats. Who do you think is viewed as the best out of those 2 guys in terms of, like, if you're putting together a power ranking of what the Nats just got and being sellers once again, who do you think is at the top of that list?
Just based on the way Rizzo spoke about him, Clemmie, I think, is the one they're most excited about. Now, they know a 19-year-old pitcher, so who knows how that's going to work. Coming out of high school, he's only been professional for a year. So they understand the risk involved in that. But they see a high ceiling there from him, and they were pretty excited to get him in the Lane Thomas deal. I think Wallace is a nice pickup for them as somebody who is closer to big league ready. He's been out with an injury, but eventually should be healthy and maybe finish out the year at AA and be at AAA next year and could figure in somewhere down the line. Also keep in mind that the Harvey trade netted them the 39th pick in the draft, which they used on Caleb Lomavita. They really viewed that as a big pickup for them as a catcher they liked in the draft and found a way to get him with a pick they only acquired 24 hours before the draft. So I think those are the top 3. But I think Clemmie, based on what I heard from Rizzo, sounds to me like the one they're most excited about. And that's a long-term project. It's going to be years till we know how that one works out. But they were especially excited to get that guy and add that arm to their system.
This is the 4th season of the Nats Chat podcast. This was the 4th season of the Nats being sellers come the trade deadline. The hope is that we are done with the Nats being aggressive sellers come the trade deadline. But of course, we shall see. Hey, it's Al Galdi to tell you about the latest offer from Window Nation. For listeners of the Nats Chat podcast, get 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy, plus pay nothing with no interest for 2 full years. This is better than any offer that you'll hear about regarding the trade deadline. I promise you. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Window Nation is outstanding. Every Window Nation window undergoes a 20-point inspection. Window Nation has a 96% customer satisfaction rating, and 96% of Window Nation windows installed require no follow-up service. Take advantage of this special offer for listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy, plus pay nothing with no interest for 2 full years. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. That's 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. And make sure that you tell Window Nation that Al Galdi sent you.
Here's a report from Rochester on Tuesday. Dylan Cruz, 3 hits out of the leadoff spot, a double and a pair of singles. And Brady House homered and also singled. He knocked in 4 runs in the victory. Now back to the show.
And the batter now is Lourdes Gurriel Jr. Struck out swinging first time up and lines the first pitch toward the right field line. It's down and fair. Cole will chase toward the line. Rounding third, coming home to score Moreno. And Gurriel is in standing at second with a double. Back-to-back doubles. And the D-backs have played it 4 in the bottom of the second inning. It's now Arizona 6 and Washington nothing.
Well, we had the trade deadline on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then we had a ball game late night on Tuesday night. The Washington Nationals at the Arizona Diamondbacks at Chase Field in Phoenix, Arizona. And while technically this was a game, you could argue that this was more like a scrimmage. The final score was Diamondbacks 17, Nationals nothing. This was a humiliating loss for the Nats. There's no way around that. This was the worst margin of defeat for the Nats since the franchise came to D.C. And you had in this game as the Nats starting pitcher, the former Diamondback, Patrick Corbin. And he made Nats history, and not in a good way. Corbin allowed 11 runs, 10 earned in 3 innings. He became the first Nats pitcher since the franchise came to D.C. to allow at least 11 runs in a regular season game. This is season number 20 for the Nats in D.C. Corbin on Tuesday night did something that no Nats pitcher had done since the franchise came to D.C. Corbin in this game gave up 13 hits, which were a home run, 4 doubles, and 8 singles. It's funny, he issued no walks. He actually had 3 strikeouts. He actually threw a good number of strikes, 67 pitches, 46 strikes versus 21 balls. But none of that matters when you allow 11 runs, 10 earned in 3 innings. And this was an onslaught. 2 runs, bottom of the first, 7 runs, bottom of the second, 2 runs, bottom of the third. And then the Diamondbacks put up 2 runs, bottom of the sixth, a run, bottom of the seventh, 3 runs in the bottom of the eighth. So now that the trade deadline has come and gone, any pie in the sky notion of Mike Rizzo doing with Patrick Corbin as Rizzo in 2021 did with John Lester, that's out the window. Corbin is here. This is the final season of the 6-year contract that he signed with the team in December 2018. It feels like, as bad as Corbin was and as bad as he is doing this season, there's just still is not a realistic path by which he's out of the rotation before the end of this season. Do you see things that way? Or do you think, even with the lack of obvious starting pitching options for the Nats right now, we actually could see Corbin removed from the rotation at some point over these next 2 months?
I think it would have to involve a combination of more starts along these lines than, to be honest, he had been okay for about his last 8 starts, an ERA in the 3s, 3.87, I think it was. So that's respectable. This one, obviously not. I think it would take more of this. I think it would also then take either Cade Cavalli being ready to come back and pitch, and maybe that does happen in September. I think they still want to believe that that's going to happen, or somebody else really stepping it up that shows that they're ready to come in here, whether it's Jackson Rutledge or Brad Lord or somebody else. But I think the other issue there is we've talked about all the young pitchers they have, and they're being very careful with them. Mitchell Parker, DJ Hers, Jake Irvin, maybe to an extent, Mackenzie Gore to a little extent. They need innings from somebody. And I just don't think they drop Corbin without knowing that they've got all those innings covered. They do not want to make a young guy have to throw more than they are comfortable with, especially come September. So even if it means a 6-man rotation, maybe when Cade Cavalli is ready, I could see Corbin still being a part of it. I don't think he's going anywhere, not anytime soon. The one thing you can say about him is he usually gives them innings. In this case, he did not, and that's a real disappointment of it all. 11 runs is awful no matter what. If it was somehow 11 runs over 6 innings, you'd feel a little bit better than 11 runs over 3 innings. Part of me was half expected to see him come back out to the mound for the 4th. They decided not to push it any further, but it wouldn't have shocked me if he had done that. And that tells you so much about how they treat him and what he is right now and what they think they still need to try to get out of him.
We have seen some spectacular blow-up starts from Patrick Corbin over these last 5 seasons, but this was something else what we saw late night on Tuesday night, and it was almost like a message from the baseball gods of if you had any doubts about, well, should the Nats have really been aggressive sellers this year? They lose a game like that, they're back down to 10 games below 500 for this regular season, and it's a reality check for sure. And with Patrick Corbin, at times, yes, he has been better this season. We've talked about that. But take a listen to this. Corbin now for this regular season is dead last among all qualified pitchers in ERA, WHIP, runs allowed, and hits allowed. I mean, he's right back to being quantifiably the worst pitcher in the majors. That's just the truth, okay? I mean, we're not trying to kick a guy when he's down, but the truth is the truth. The ERA is at 5.88. The WHIP is at 153, and here we are again. I mean, it's a 5th consecutive bad season. And this game, 17-0, you lose like 9-0. That's bad. You lose 17-0. It's like a football score. You had in this game the Diamondbacks starting third baseman and cleanup batter, Eugenio Suarez, hitting 3 home runs. He went 4 for 5 with 3 homers, a single, 5 RBI, and 4 runs. And then the Nats bullpen had a bad game in this game. 3 Nats relievers combined to allow 6 runs in 5 innings. Eduardo Salazar, 2 runs, 2 2/3 innings. Yohan Adon, 1 run and 1 1/3 innings. He is back. The Nats on Tuesday night announced having recalled Adon from AAA Rochester. And Tanner Rainey, bottom of the 8th, allowing 3 runs. So from a pitching standpoint, this is about as bad as it gets.
Yeah, 100%. And I actually thought Salazar's first 2 innings were all right. They put him back out there for a 3rd inning and it got ugly at that point as the pitch count went up. So maybe that's one of the factors there, although he didn't have any strikeouts. And this is a guy who, in theory, is supposed to have really good stuff. So that wasn't so encouraging. Yohan Adon back up here as they knew they needed to bring somebody in for any trades they made. We'll see how long he sticks around. It was not especially good. And then Tanner Rainey, here's the irony there. With Dylan Floro gone, with Hunter Harvey gone, there's a real lack of experienced setup men now to get the ball to Kyle Finnegan when they do actually have a lead. And who's going to take on that job? Well, we've seen Robert Garcia get a little bit more. We've seen Derek Law be used in late innings. But Davey Martinez pregame said he thinks it's time to start using Tanner Rainey again in higher leverage spots. He admitted that he's babied him, that he's been careful with him, protected him all summer long, not pitching as much, obviously pitching in blowouts. This one, of course, was a blowout. But I think they want to see how he would do in a situation of more consequence. Well, he didn't exactly help his cause with the way that bottom of the 8th went. It was ugly. They hit him hard. It looked so much like many of his other outings this year. And I don't know if that changes the calculus at all of how they want to proceed with him. But somebody's going to have to pitch, say, the 6th, 7th, and 8th innings for this team when they have a lead, which will happen again someday. And that could be the ugliest part of the final 2 months of the season. The lineup is going to struggle, we know. The rotation at times has looked good, at times has looked bad. But the bullpen, which for a lot of the first half of the season really held things together for them, even with Finnegan still here, there's a pretty gaping hole to get the ball to him, and I'm interested to see how that plays out.
This has been a rather difficult series so far. Late night on Monday night, the 9-8 walk-off loss. The Nats in that game blew an 8-4 ninth-inning lead. Now late night on Tuesday night, a 17-0 loss. And the Nats offense in this game, it's not even really worth discussing. The Nats offense did nothing in this game. No runs, 4 hits, all of which were singles, 2 walks, 0 for 1 with runners in scoring position. It is crazy how, the Nats lately have been better offensively, right? And yet in a game in which they're down by so much so early, it's like the offense goes into hibernation. It's like, the good offense that we had been seeing in recent games just was not there at all. And so this just ended up being domination by the Diamondbacks. It's an interesting deal to me with the offense because it can put up 8, 9, 10 runs, but the Nats get shut out so often that in no way can you say that this is a good offense. And the overall numbers for the offense are bad. But there are games, and we saw them recently, in which the Nats, put up 10 runs at the Cardinals last Friday night, 14 runs at the Cardinals last Saturday night. And then just a few games later, we're right back to being shut out.
Yeah, look, this is the 13th time they've been shut out this year. That's tied for most in the majors with the White Sox, who at last check are 27-83. That's not the kind of company you want to keep. So it's 13th time they've been shut out this year. 5th time this month alone. 5 times in July they've been shut out. And of course, that includes a no-hitter just recently. And yet they've had some of their best offensive performances of the season in the last month. What strikes me is it feels like when it comes to opposing starting pitcher, they either see him well, hit him well, and put up big numbers, or they get off to a rough start and they never figure it out against him. There aren't a lot of games where it's like, well, first time through the lineup, they didn't do anything, but second time through, all right, they finally figured him out. Or, okay, they jumped on this guy, but then they immediately cooled off. No, once they get going against somebody, they tend to sustain it. So I don't know why that is. It is showing a lack of adjustment, I think, in some cases, which is not great to see. Maybe with young hitters that they have right now, that's something to be somewhat expected. But that part of it, to me, has been really frustrating. Now, I get it. You're down so much early. It's got to be hard, to pick yourself up and say, okay, let's try to battle back and make a game out of this. But, there were very few competitive at-bats in this game. They had they didn't finally get a runner in scoring position until the 8th inning. I mean, that tells you how little they did at the plate in this game.
Yeah, and I don't think that this team has guys who've done enough and have earned the right to just sort of check out when the team is down by a lot. Like, this team has a lot of guys who still have a lot to prove. So whether the score is, Diamondbacks 17, Nats nothing, or Nats, 12, Diamondbacks nothing, like, you need to be engaged and you need to be trying to do well here because a lot of these guys have a lot to prove, I think, at the major league level. We do have a new Nats position player at the major league level. The Nats on Tuesday night announced having selected the contract of outfielder Travis Blankenhorn from AAA Rochester. We saw him with the Nats at the major league level last September. He has had a good season for Rochester, 401 plate appearances, OPS of 847. This is his age 27 season. He's not some, super regarded prospect or anything like that. But like I said, he's done some good stuff this year at AAA. Do you think we'll be seeing a good bit of Blankenhorn or not so much?
I think it's going to be not a straight platoon, but I think you're going to see he and Alex Call get a lot of the starts in right field. Maybe Blankenhorn getting some starts at DH against righties if maybe Harold Ramirez isn't the right matchup for that game. He was available. He did come off the bench in this one. I think he'd just flown in. They didn't want to throw him into the lineup right away. But against most righties, I think we'll probably see him in right field. He did have good numbers there at AAA. Doesn't mean it's going to translate into anything. He was not all that impressive last year when he came up, but he also was dealing with plantar fasciitis in his foot. And so maybe that had something to do with it. So you get a look. We know who's on the way. This is ultimate placeholder territory right now in right field. And I think now that we're past the trade deadline, I think all eyes are on Dylan Cruz at Rochester and keeping track of how he's doing and counting down the days to whenever they believe that the time is right to call him up. I don't think it's happening very soon. I think they need to see more from him on a consistent basis, make sure that he's mastered that level. But I do think we're going to see him before the end of the year. I think it behooves everybody, as long as he doesn't look overwhelmed at AAA, I think it's worth it to get him a taste of this right now because I do believe they want him to be in the plans for opening day 2025.
Game 3 for the Nats at the Diamondbacks Wednesday afternoon at 3:40. Mackenzie Gore will be the Nats starting pitcher. This installment of the Nats Chat podcast brought to us by the best legal recruiter in the Washington, D.C. market, Mason Kalfas. Step up to a World Series winner and hire the best legal recruiter out there. Check out Mason's website today, zenithlegal.com, or call or text Mason anytime, 202-486-3535. You can hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can email the podcast, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We invite you to check out our website, natschatpodcast.com, in which you can purchase a Nats Chat podcast t-shirt. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat podcast.
6.5 games in front of Omaha's parent club, the Royals. Pitch to House, belted high in the air to left center field. Back toward the scoreboard goes Velasquez. He's near the fence, and this is out of here. It's a towering home run from Brady House that got out to left center. His first innovative field home run. And what a towering, soaring homer it was. 5-0 Red Wings.